Well, it's a brand new Monday. Thank you for joining us. This is the AM show. My name is Benjamin Akakbo. Thank you for making the time to join us. Now, this morning, we're going to have a lot coming your way. But even before we get into our big stories, the news review, we're going to have our usual, and we have a guest joining us in the person of Ernesto Yeboah, Commander-in-Chief of the Economic Fighters League. He'll be joining the conversation right here on the AM show as we dig into the papers and beyond. But let's get into our big stories. This morning on the AM show, we're putting the spotlight, throwing it on how much Ghana actually received as financial support in the year 2020 to 2021. Now, we'll look at all sources, the foreign sources, and extend the analysis to 2021 since similar grants and support poured in that year as well. We'd use government's own accounting data to make people understand the full thrust of this. Our guest joining us for that discussion, Dr. John Kumah, Deputy Finance Minister, Professor Lord Mensah, Finance Lecturer with the University of Ghana Business School, and Dr. Patrick Assuming, Economist at the University of Ghana Business School. Also coming up, we're going to be talking about that newbie, the e-travel card. Public officials are no longer to travel with physical cash. Government has launched the e-travel card to facilitate the cashless disbursement of travel allowances and other payments for local and foreign trips of public officials. The introduction of the card means that public officials will no more be provided with physical cash. We know the instances we've had with those. That is for their impress when they are traveling for state duties. Today, we'll delve into that issue as well when we host Dr. Gideon Bwako. He is an economic advisor and spokesperson at the Office of the President. Also coming up today, something we simply can't avoid, fuel price hikes. Lorry fares are going up by 30%. The Coalition of Transport Operators have disclosed that starting from today, the 7th of February, transport fares will be increased by a whopping 30%. We'll be live from a transport yard near you to check if this has actually taken place and what are the regulations in place. Is this going to actually pan out today? We'll bring you details of that. And in sports, of course, Senegal, the Teranga Lions, eclipsing the Pharaohs of Egypt. We'll bring you that in sports. But right now, let's settle for the news. That is up next. Do stay. Well, let's get it on now with the news. Thank you for staying. Now, the KNUST branch of the Tertiary Education Students Confederacy, that is TESCON KNUST of the New Patriotic Party, has blamed the opposition National Democratic Congress for the UTAG NLC impasse. The president of TESCON at KNUST, Collins Nanabedu, believes the failure of the NDC to implement the recommendations of the 2014 Labour Market Survey has worsened the situation. Addressing a press conference in Kumasi, Mr. Beidou pointed at the nonchalant attitude of the Mahama-led administration for the current stalemate between the University Teachers Association of Ghana and the National Labour Commission.
Stranded on the various campuses, especially here in KNUST. Nobody can underestimate the effect of this industrial action by UTAG on these innocent students. TESCON KNUST is grateful to the court for urging the National Labour Commission and UTAG to settle their issues out of court. We hope and pray as the government and UTAG return to the negotiation table, a lasting solution will be achieved to enable we the students to begin our academic activities in earnest. We are pleading with both the government and UTAG not to enter into this negotiation with an entrenched position. Both parties should be ready to make a compromise and soften their stance. Friends of the media, it has come to our notice that the members of the leading opposition party, the NDC, are capitalizing on this strike action by UTAG to achieve cheap political points, but they should bear in mind that if they had implemented the recommendations of the 2014 Labour Market Survey, our hard-working lecturers would not have requested for these demands now. When UTAG and other teacher unions started to demand for what was due them when Mr. John Mahama and the NDC were in power, the president then, Mr. John Mahama, told them, and I quote, I've seen more demonstrations and strikes in my first 2 years. I don't think it can get worse. It is said that when you kill a goat and you frighten it with a knife, it doesn't fear the knife because it is already dead. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, it was this same lack of respect for teachers by the John Mahama-led administration that made teachers, even at the basic schools, work for 3 years and were paid only 3 months of their salaries. We are not here to do politics of equalization or comparison, because we know it was the more reason why the NDC was disgracefully voted out of office with a large margin of over 1 million votes. The listening and Adodanko Akufo-Addo government will not disrespect UTAG, but will continue to listen and engage UTAG to bring a lasting solution to this problem.
Well, the Arts Teachers Association of Ghana is on a collision course with government over its fixation on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics to the detriment of arts education. According to the association, the notion of STEM education being the sole magic wand to producing capable workforces to drive the desired national development is deficient and erroneous and must be corrected. Speaking at a news conference at Winneba, President of the association, Dr. Kweku Essel, explained that developed countries have long shifted from STEM education and included arts that develop a holistic individual. Richard Kwejonyako has more in this report.
The association says the philosophy behind the STEM policy is based upon the idea that the study of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics in schools could produce the best and innovative brains to become scientists, engineers, and architects to drive national development. They say the notion of STEM education being the sole solution to the challenges of Ghana's industrial growth is erroneous. Presenting the official position on the recent adoption of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics STEM education, the association noted that relegating arts education to the background and fixating their gaze on only STEM education would not achieve the needed results. National President of the Teachers of Arts Association of Ghana, Dr. Kweku Essel, says arts as an important subject ought to be given attention in government quest to develop the nation.
Based on best global practices, the Art Teachers Association of Ghana make its position clear on the continuous exclusion of the arts education in the promotion of science, technology, engineering, mathematics education in Ghana policies in terms of education. The resolve of the Ministry of Education to introduce STEM, that is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education, is laudable. However, the exclusion of the arts in the said policies has serious implications and consequences on the success rate and holistic development of creative and inventive learners.
The association believes the developed countries have shown the way and should be emulated.
Advanced countries such as China, US, UK, France, Malaysia, Singapore have rigorously shifted from STEM to STEAM, that is science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, and all stream curriculum, because they acknowledge that the pursuance of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education are enablers, since the resultant must be a product which is mostly physical manifestation of artificial intelligence. For this reason, they do not downplay the art, which has to do with product design and development. STREAM suggests the inclusion of robotics to science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics.
The association is thus urging government to change course and add the arts into its policies in order to cause the needed changes the country yearns for. Reporting for Joy News, Richard Kwejonyako, Cape Coast.
Now, the Esikuma Odobing Brakwa District Assembly has described the classroom project as a huge relief to the district in terms of educational infrastructure. District Chief Executive Lawrence Edutia Esiao acknowledged that the project has come to fill the gap created by a bigger project which has stalled. Pledging his commitment towards timely completion, Mr. Edutia Esiao commended the multimedia group for selecting his district as a beneficiary of the classroom project. MFA Atiamwa Eli has more.
In fulfillment of the Assembly's commitment to the successful completion of the 3-unit classroom block for the Brima Chamra GA Basic School, the Esukuma Odobem Brakwa District Chief Executive Lawrence Edutia Esiong personally escorted 8 trucks of sand to the construction site to fill the foundation. He organized an excavator to move to site the trips of laterites required for the hydrophone block production. Expressing the district's excitement about the ongoing projects, Mr. Edutia Esiong revealed how he got wind of the project.
I think the first day I heard about this, I was on radio and I saw a text message that, hey, your district is being discussed on Asempa. And I was confused then, but I concluded that maybe it's for a good cause. And I've seen the results.
For the DCE, the classroom project is filling a critical educational infrastructure gap which would have otherwise caused the Assembly a lot more to be able to provide.
If we were taking the entire project to execute, we would understand how much it was going to cost the Assembly. And so if a team had taken that upon themselves and the little commitment that we need to give to support that, I think it's in good cause. And so we will be committed to the project. Most importantly, look at the number of projects that we need to undertake. It's only by the grace of God when someone or a team, another team decides to intervene and then help us in their own small way. But specifically with Jamra, we know the history, and I did not to repeat what we wouldn't want to hear again. But there is a bigger project that was started some time ago. I'm sure if that project had been completed, I think this issue wouldn't have really come up. And so we are aware, work so far, what needs to be done. And so your team should be rest assured that we are not going to fail on our side, specifically what we need to do. So let's expect the best. And once again, I'm grateful.
Senior news editor at Joy News, Fifi Kumsin, who led a team from the multimedia group to ascertain the progress of work on site, applauded the DCE for his support, while reminding him the classroom project could be another solution to his quest to dealing with teacher attrition in the district.
You're talking about attrition rate. Sometimes teachers are uncomfortable teaching in certain classroom blocks. It's a reason they may not even be teaching. Yeah, so definitely it will also be an encouragement to some teachers to even do their work. And of course to the children in the community who would not want to go to school because they fear their classroom will collapse on them. I am very excited, and on behalf of the multimedia group, we want to thank you for your support. We hope that within the next few days or weeks, this project will be done.
With the provision of sand, work on site has picked up once more. The DCE could not hold back his joy and appreciation to the multimedia group and its partners.
Maybe I should add my voice in thanking all those who have been contributing, because I see him for almost every time trying to thank even those who are yet to contribute. So we are grateful to those supporting the multimedia in execute. I know it's not easy at all, because sometimes you do the projections and expect a certain something that needs to be, even especially when the public know that, hey, once this initiative, they may even think that probably individuals have given everything to be done. But in actual sense, it may not be as the people may think. So sometimes we understand possibly the hell that you might be going through, but our support is there. We are going to give it our best, and so God bless the multimedia, and thank you for the work so far.
The classroom project is brought to you in partnership with the Star Ghana Foundation, with funding from the Dutch Foreign Affairs Ministry. It is supported by the Israeli Embassy, the Forestry Commission, the Planned City Extension Project, DBS roofing sheets, as well as you, our cherished audiences. The Classroom Project, promoting social justice through philanthropy. Amafa Atiamwa Eli. For Joy News, Brima Jamra.
Well, you can also support the Classroom Project by sending your donations to MTN Momo number 0593 038 832. Or you may call our front desk for more information on how to give for change. Now, health experts have called for the establishment of cancer centers in district hospitals in the Ashanti Regional, and the Ashanti Regional Deputy Director of Clinical Care, Dr. Rita Larson-Reindorf, is calling for the establishment of cancer centers in the district hospitals to deal with the rising cases of the disease. She observes the two centers at Kolebu and Komfuanoche teaching hospitals are not enough to deal with the disease. Now, speaking as part of activities to mark World Cancer Day in Kumasi, she noted such centers would ensure comprehensive care and management of cancer cases.
Dr. Larson-Reindorf wants training of more oncologists to augment their limited number in the country. She believes government policy will be crucial in this direction.
So far as cancer is concerned, training institutions, I can see the nurses, trainees here. Training institutions will also have to review their curriculum and include some of these things in the curriculum in terms of cancer management. And then when we talk about infrastructure, it's limiting. We have, I think, Kolebu and then Kumasi. That is all. What we are sitting, the building we see in front of us, that is it. We need more of such centers because experience has shown the importance of national cancer centers in assuring a comprehensive approach to cancer treatment, so that when you bring the services for prevention, diagnosis, multidisciplinary treatment and supportive care together in one place, it makes it easier for patients to be able to navigate services.
The program, jointly organized by the City Cancer Challenge and the Ghana Health Service, is under the theme Close the Care Gap. Dr. Kusia Jima Omarisasu is Kumasi Metro Health Director.
The City Cancer Challenge from 2018. And this is for Kumasi to become a learning center for other countries and for in-country to learn how we can improve on the quality of care and also on the preventive services, getting people in the community to know what cancer is about, how they can prevent it, how we can support them also in making sure they don't go to prayer camps and other places for treatment when they suffer for these. We have technical working committees for the Cancer City Challenge for Kumasi, which are working on protocols for guidelines across a spectrum of cancer. Cancer is not one disease. It can affect the head, any part of the body. So these are things we are doing. And before we started, we did a needs assessment to make sure we know where the gaps are so that we put in interventions to do that.
Lydia Seusu of the Non-Communicable Disease Division of the Ashanti Regional Health Directorate revealed her outfit will be undertaking screening exercises in the communities to ensure early detection.
We are going to our various destinations. We are pleading with you, when you go back, tell your people in the communities, in the schools, everywhere, when you see us coming, please avail yourself for us to do this screening for you. And we are also around all the institutions that wish, or if we haven't been to your area, please come to our aid. We are the Regional Health Directorate. At all the health institutions, this screening is being done. And the most interesting part is, when we do the cancer screening, it is not left alone at that end. We do hypertension.
Reporter for Joy News, Kwesi Deborah.
Now let's talk depression and anxiety, which are common among deaf people, according to a 2019 Oxford University study. Nearly 500,000 Ghanaians are deaf per the latest population and housing census But a lack of attention for many of them means some endure a life of pain with little or no help in critical times such as childbirth. In the following report, my colleague Justice Beidou throws a light on the life of a mother with hearing impairment and her journey to bringing up her daughter.
When Esther Kofi found out that she was pregnant, she says her heart skipped a beat. As a deaf and dumb woman in a country with little or no support for people of her like, life was already tough.
There's a lot of, hearing people who refused to accept me as a deaf person.
Thanks to her family, her delivery and parenting has not been as rough. But not all deaf mothers are this lucky.
Some people think that, deaf people can take care of their kids. Actually, we can, and we do our best. I like her a lot. She's really smart, and she actually got to know that her parents are deaf, very early. Example, when we go out, when I go out with her, and we are in the car, she doesn't talk with me, like speaking. She signs with me when we're in the car because she knows that her mom is deaf. It was difficult coming up, even to the extent that teachers were even calling me Mumuni. It got to a point when you come to my school and you mention my name, nobody knew me until you say Mumuni. Before everybody will know, oh yes, this is the guy, you are looking for. It was that bad.
Jonathan in Team Dakun grew up in Koforidua. His mother and father were both deaf. Today he works with the Ghana Federation for the Deaf, and he's the one who has come with me to meet Esther and to help me interpret what she wants to tell me.
If a person is born deaf already, being deaf alone has its own mental health implications on the individual. There are some deaf people who get all the support that they want. Other deaf people don't have that. They don't have the support. Nobody's helping them. Nobody, they are neglected. Look at what that alone can do to a person. So if that person happens to be a mother, then they end up treating, it also has some kind of effect on the child, because then they end up treating the child in a certain way that we would say it's not right.
A 2019 Oxford University study showed deaf adults have a higher reported rate of diagnosis of depression or anxiety disorder at an earlier onset compared to the general population. The Ghana Health Service does not have sign language interpreters in many health facilities across the country. Deaf women go into labor many times under doctors who do not know how to communicate with them. Antenatal and postnatal centers largely do not have sign language interpreters, and there is almost no one to talk to about their mental health post-delivery.
In Ghana too, even normal people who have mental health are not even able to access healthcare because of what discrimination and how people will talk about them. How much more a deaf person? They don't even know that there's a place where they can even go to get that assistance. I'm not God to know what her future will be, but what is I want to do is that I want to work so hard to give her the best education that she needs, to give her every needs that she wants. Maybe when she grows up, she's of age and she wants to be a doctor, I'm ready to support her to become what she wants to become. I'm ready to encourage her to learn hard, to make her parents proud.
Compared to her friends, Esther has been lucky. But in a country where care for deaf people is almost non-existent, many deaf mothers are going through a dark, lonely journey of caring for their children. Justice Beidou, Joy News, Ebri.
And that's a wrap for the news, but we have a lot more for you as we bring you our news review and the big stories after that. Do stay with us on the AM show. We'll be right back.
Mr. Speaker, in total, your committee has proposed 48 questions as admitted by Mr. Speaker to be answered by ministers. Of these, 3 are urgent and 45 are regular questions to be answered orally. And Mr. Speaker, again, your committee came to a conclusion that in accordance with Order 72, you may admit statements and again allow papers to be laid, motions and resolutions taken after debates, and of course, Mr. Speaker, as and when the case may be, referral to committees may be made. So, Speaker, the all-important e-levy which government seeks to use to transform our economy, build our roads, and enable our youth start their business, is also expected to Mr. Speaker, the minority leader says I should ignore the minority chief whip for heckling me. Mr. Speaker, having said so, I shall pray you, Mr. Speaker, to permit these proposals to be considered by the House in accordance with Order 162 and subject to Order 53 of the rules of this House. Mr. Speaker, attached here too is the order in which the business of the ensuing week has been programmed, and we have a number of questions for Tuesday, the 8th of February, and papers to be laid have also been advertised. And Mr. Speaker, if you go to Wednesday, similar approach is adopted, and all the way to, Mr. Speaker, Friday, where we have just some few only questions, Mr. Speaker. On Friday, we have questions and just one motion. So, Mr. Speaker, without more, I so submit. So the item on electronic transfer levy bill, and you look at the 3rd and 4th and 5th paragraph, the Speaker, it leaves you with a lot of uncertainty. The use of words like likelihood of unforeseen circumstances. Mr. Speaker, if you look at Order 160 of our standing orders, we are supposed to have business program in the House with certainty. It's supposed to be with certainty. Now we have moved from giving the finance minister 1 week to 2 weeks, and now we are even adding more. Yet we are claiming that we cannot give the finance committee time to do that. Mr. Speaker, if our colleagues from the majority want us to have certainty, if you are withdrawing, come and withdraw now and tell us that you come back with the business. So we know that the business is not before the House. But so long as you leave it lingering, Mr. Speaker, with using words like likelihood, unforeseen circumstances. For those of us in the minority, the only conclusion is that you are trying to lay ambush on us. Because you are not certain with the things that you are saying. If you are certain, come and withdraw.
So with e-levy, I do not think that the Minister for Finance is the Committee of Finance of Parliament. I do not. And I will not accept any reasoning that he must do inquiry for and on behalf of the Finance Committee of Parliament. Indeed, if we have railroaded the e-levy bill as he wish through a certificate of urgency, will he have the opportunity to consult the people of Ghana? So once the bill is referred to a committee of Parliament, the proper place for an inquiry to engage stakeholders and the Ghanaian citizens is Parliament. So I would ask, what is our Finance Committee doing? It is not for the Minister for Finance to go around the country. It's for our Committee on Finance. And Mr. Speaker, the matter of certainty and clarity that on Friday, 11 February, the bill may be withdrawn and a new bill may be introduced. Members need to know so that they plan their lives. Last week, we gave you good advice. If you had introduced a new bill last week, by now the Finance Committee will be engaging stakeholders.
Well, that is the floor of Parliament and the entire talk about, well, the e-levy being suspended or withdrawn and to be brought back. What do you make of that, though? The minority has said that this is just, these are just some shenanigans, some attempts to let them not know when exactly this will be tabled on the floor of Parliament and to put them at a certain disadvantage. But others have said in respect of the Asin North Member of Parliament's situation, if I can still call him Member of Parliament, that the law is the law. Well, let's get into the papers this morning and find out what they reflect in respect of the e-levy and beyond. Joining us, Ernesto Yeboah, Commander-in-Chief of the Economic Fighters League. Well, let me start with some of the papers as Ernesto joins the conversation. The Daily Graphic this morning, and the banner headline, "Remove all toll booths, danger to motorists," and the National Road Safety Authority engineers are telling the ministry. I went through one of those areas which had a toll booth over the weekend, and interesting, I actually forgot that we're no longer taking, the tolls. And so I took out my 50 pesewa coin and was headed in a certain direction, only to remember that, we're actually no longer paying the tolls. I ended up laughing at myself. But according to the story, the Ministry of Roads and Highways has come under pressure to demolish all the 38 toll booths across the country which are not in use to prevent accidents and optimize road safety. The National Road Safety Authority and the Consulting Engineers Association have called on the ministry to remove the toll booths once they have no use for them. And that is the thrust of the entire directive, or at least what is being spoken of here. President tasks AU to reform global financial structure. Government implements 6 tax relief measures, and driver convicted of spilling concrete on the road. When you go to the middle spread of the paper, fighting galamsey through alternative livelihoods, worthwhile endeavor. And on the back page, Mane, I'm talking about Sadio Mane, inspires Senegal to first African title. It was 2 Liverpool stalwarts, Sadio Mane versus Mo Salah, and it was Mane who carried the day, though he missed that penalty initially in the game. Well, let me say a very good morning to Ernesto Yeboah. Good morning, my brother. How are you?
I'm good. You?
By God's grace, I am very well.
Nice.
There are quite a number of issues that we have discussed in the last week or so, and I want to run some of them by you. Let me start with the issue of this MCE for Sekandi Takrady, who has been mired in a whole lot of trouble. I'm sure you've heard the audio. Have you listened to the audio, Ernesto Yeboah?
No, I haven't, but
okay.
I've definitely followed social media commentary, and it doesn't look like the public has been kind to him.
It doesn't look like the public has been kind to him.
Yeah, in terms of the public outlash and all of that. Sometimes, people need to be understood within the full context. And I would hope that a full investigation, because From the commentary, what I get is that he didn't know he was being recorded. That's one. The police officer knew he was recording. That's two. So if you are
should you know you're being recorded? You're a public official. Should you know you're being recorded, and would that determine how you act, regardless of the context? And by the way, at a point in time, the police officer let him know that I am recording you, all the things you're saying, calling me ugly, stupid, you will transfer me to Enchi and all of that. I've captured it on my phone. And he even attempted, the MCE attempted snatching the phone of the police officer. So does it matter?
Yeah, I mean, I knew I was coming on TV. This is obviously not how I was dressed, but the moment I was told, hey, you are coming on
Right, so we'll work on the connection with Ernesto. Ernesto, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, we are having a slight challenge with your connection. Let me just try one more time. Right. All right. So Ernesto, we'll get to you as and when we have a more stable connection, and then we shall take it from there. So I started with the Daily Graphic newspaper, and I was just running some thoughts by Ernesto Yeboah in terms of the MCE's situation. Of course, we know of his suspension. We also know that he has penned that letter or that release that talks about his compliance with, the directives so far in terms of what Mr. President has said. So let's see how exactly that pans out. But that's it for the Daily Graphic newspaper. Let's get to our next newspaper as we try to reconnect with Ernesto Yeboah. The Ghanaian Times newspaper now, and Veep launches e-travel cards to control expenditure. E-travel cards to control expenditure. There's also, let me just get into that story right before I move on from there. Page 16 of the paper carries that. And it says, the Vice President, Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia, has launched an electronic travel card designed to specifically control the travel expenditure of government and public officials. Known as the e-travel card, it seeks to facilitate the cashless disbursement of travel allowance and other payments for local and foreign trips of public officials. It falls under the government's policy of digitalizing the country, as all officials will be issued with the e-travel card. It is expected that the implementation of the new policy would regulate and control waste and misappropriation of funds by traveling officials. Dr. Bawumia launched the card at the 22nd Annual Delegates Conference of the Controller and Accountant General's Department held at Cape Coast. He indicated that the system would automate and integrate all the processes from the point of initiation of card issuance, funding requests of ministries, departments and agencies and entities through approvals and disbursements. Right. So it will be interesting, wouldn't it, to find out what your thoughts are, you out there, this e-travel card. Do you feel it's actually going to be able to curb or control expenditure? Of course, we've known of sometimes flagrant abuses that some of our public officials get mired in when it comes to travel and expenses. Is this going to be the solution? We'll get into that even later on the show as we talk about it. But welcome back. Welcome back, Ernesto. You're joining us via the phone line now. Thank you for staying with us.
Thank you.
Right. So you were making a point right before the connection went bad. I would have you wrap up on that point before we move on.
Yes, I was saying that, look, if I'm aware that I'm appearing on television.
Right.
I mean, I would definitely put on something that's presentable, you see. But if it's, I'm not going to be seen and it's just a phone interview, as we have reverted to now. I can just take off my shirt and sit in a more relaxed position that may be undignifying, if shown to the public. So that act of recording, I wouldn't condemn it, but I think that in terms of how we judge or how we make pronouncements on the DC, we need to factor that as well.
Let me just ask you a question, Ernesto. Are you suggesting that, and of course, even in a court of law, there are contexts where you cannot just record someone and take them to court and say that this is my evidence? Yes, I understand that. But even in a court of law, sometimes these are acceptable based on context. Are you suggesting, for example, if I, Benjamin Akakpo, were to be somewhere on one of our roads and maybe I had flouted one of our regulations, our road regulations, and then I ended up slapping a police officer, the MTTD officer who had accosted me, beating him up and all of that, or something of the sort, it would be okay once I didn't know I was being shot on camera or something of the sort. If I had a verbal exchange saying all manner of nasty things, it would be okay because I didn't know I was being recorded.
No,
is that what you're suggesting?
No, that's not what I'm suggesting. And I'm sure you know what I'm actually suggesting.
I don't know, which is why I'm asking.
I'm saying that we need to be a bit kind to the man in terms of, or open-minded, if you ask.
I see.
In terms of how we pass judgment. And given that the matter is in court, I think sometimes we might actually be wrong. The court may see it different.
Right.
So given that the matter is in court and the extent of investigation is not fully disclosed yet,
right,
I would rather hasten slowly when coming at some point.
Well, I agree with you, Ernesto, but you cannot take away the angst of the public when it comes to some of the MCE's choice of words. So I guess it's a balance in there. But of course, we'll leave it to the committee investigating the matter to come out with its own report. Of course, the police is also delving into the matter. But quickly, Ernesto, we've heard of this latest development, and I just want to run it by you. So S&P Global rates Ghana positively, and it says Ghana's growth prospects look bright, but Moody's disagrees. So here's the latest when it comes to our economy, and I know you are particularly concerned about that. Page 16 of the the Ghanaian Times newspaper, it says Standard & Poor's Global, an international rating agency, has rated the Ghanaian economy positively in its latest assessment of the country. S&P Global, in its latest assessment, rated Ghana at B negative or B with a stable outlook. The latest rating affirmed Ghana's B minus rating with a stable outlook, which S&P Global did in February, on February the 4th, 2021. Now, a statement on S&P Global latest rating on Ghana made available to the Ghanaian Times said the country's positive rating was influenced by, quote, Ghana's solid growth prospects with real gross domestic product growth projected to average close to 5% per year over 2022 to 2025. Here's the interesting bit, though. We've had some of these other ratings agencies not give us the best. Moody's disagrees, of course, and they have downgraded us to as low as C. That has been contested. What do you really feel this means for our economy, looking at the fact that fuel prices are up, and I'll be talking to you about some transport fare hikes today and all of that. What does all of this mean to you? Is it a positive development for the Ghanaian?
You really want to know what I really think?
I really want to know what you think, Ernesto.
You know, Ben, we have started in debt already. And so anything that makes us attractive for more debt is something that I discourage.
Right.
Because when you talk about credit rating, basically what you are saying is you are looking at an evaluation of the credit risk of a prospective debtor.
Right.
In this case, Ghana.
And we are in so much debt already. So this whole thing about credit rating, many of the economic jargon, honestly, when you apply it within a specific context, makes absolutely no sense. And so, yes,
are you suggesting that a lot of the time what these agencies and the rest tell us don't reflect in our day-to-day lives? Is that what you're saying?
One, they don't reflect. And then two, even when they do, they don't necessarily apply, in our case. I would move for or join any cause by the people not to go for more debt or not to incur more debt. You understand? So when these credit ratings feature and put Ghana in such a good light for credit, I'm scared.
You're scared. Are you still with us, Ernesto?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so it scares you. How do you relate then to the e-levy, for example? Now, just because we're talking of the economic situation we find ourselves in, you would want to put side by side the e-levy versus going to the IMF. 16 IMF programs. What do we have to show for them? Structural adjustment in the 80s, and now, well, we're contemplating, at least some people are, some economists like Professor Bokpin are saying, go back to the IMF. But there's also the bit about the e-levy, for example, which also has its own catch, and a lot of Ghanaians have kicked against. What is your take on the e-levy, and what do you think? Should we go to the IMF?
Well, it's not e-levy or IMF. I think those two options can be cleared off the table. We don't need e-levy, and we don't also need to go to the IMF.
Okay.
And
what do we do then? How do we fill our revenue gaps?
Reduce the pay of Article 71 office holders, abolish ex gratia, cut down on frivolous government expenses, such as the purchases of vehicles, seeking medical services outside, hiring of private jets for the presidency, abolish the concessions for rich mineral, foreign companies. There are so many things that we can do. Re-establish control of ownership of our mineral and natural resources. Give Ghanaians 50% stake in that space. Make these mineral resources more meaningful. Include it in education curricula. Let people understand what gold is, how it is mined, and things like that. Put it in our curricula. We are here in this country only for people from China to come all the way, go into our forest because they understand gold is and how it is mined. So all of these things for me brings us to that, conclusion that yes, we don't need e-levy and we don't have to go to the IMF. We simply have to do, some of these things, and then that's it. There's a point that Prof makes, that Professor Bobkin makes, that I very much agree with. That you don't give a sports child more money. It is not more money that a sports child needs. Discipline is what a sports child needs. And at this moment, let us admit to ourselves that our government over the last 30 years have been very indisciplined with the management of our resources, if I should even use the word mismanagement. So these, for me, are what we have to be discussing, and not whether we go for e-levy or we go to the IMF. I think the IMF, if they would be fair to themselves, somewhere in their mind, may even be tired of Ghana. At the moment, we've been going to IMF since God knows how. And I think it's time to put the brakes and then ask ourselves the relevant questions as a nation and redesign, moving forward.
Right. Let's look at a few more stories. In sports, Olympics stunned hearts in Gamashi derby, and Cameroon cracked back to snatch third place against the Stallions. It was interesting because they were 3 goals down, and they clawed their way back and then won on penalties. Stunning result from that match. The Daily Guide newspaper, because we've already touched on some of the others, I'll skip them, but pressure mounts on Speaker to resign. And guess who's calling on the Right Honourable Bagbin to resign? An acting General Secretary of the CPP, James Kwabena Bomfe Jr., a.k.a. Kabila, is saying that he should resign. And he is hinging his argument on illness, ill health, so to speak, principle and conscience to save Ghana's parliament. We also know that earlier, prior to this, we had Kweku Baku Jr. also ask that he step aside. But this wouldn't be the first time that, one of the top 3, I'm talking about the president, the vice, the Speaker of Parliament, even before we talk about the Chief Justice, have had health issues. So why now? What is your take on that, Ernesto? Do you think, owing to the Speaker's what has now become, should I call it, frequent travel to the United Arab Emirates to get health assistance, he ought to step aside and focus on his health?
I think it's a fair call for people to make, especially if his ill health appears to be interfering with his work. But also, to be fair, every time I have seen him in the seat, he doesn't appear mentally incapacitated. He's still eloquent, very logical in his submissions and all of that. And so the call for resignation, if not for partisan reasons, can wait. I think that he needs more time. What I'm not comfortable with is the idea that he has to go out of this country to seek medical care. In future, we may have to have some specific legislation targeted at that no public official can and must seek healthcare outside the country. We all have to be here. We all have to face, the conditions that our so-called leaders have provided for us. Over the time, if you are not comfortable in your own, healthcare environment that you have created for us, who should? If somebody is cooking for you and the person is not interested in having a taste of the food, it raises suspicion. And so I think the conversation could also look in that aspect. And then we see how we could stop our public officials, especially, from seeking medical care outside. Beyond that, we are human. We all fall sick at some point in time. We convalesce, and then we are back to our feet, or sometimes we die. So the call for resignation, I think it's too early, but it's a fair call, and we can look at it like that.
So, Ernesto Yeboah, it's a fair call, but it's coming too early. Ernesto, let me wrap with you on this matter. There are too many tax exemptions in Ghana. That's according to the World Bank's country representative. I'm talking about the Daily Dispatch newspaper. And it's interesting this comes up. If you followed Newsfile over the weekend, for example, you would have heard Professor Bokpin referencing what President Akufo-Addo said sometime in, I think, 2018, 2019, talking about the fact that tax exemptions are the bane of our country. I think it was in 2017, and that it is one of the biggest detractors when it comes to our economy. In 2018 alone, we're told that some 5 billion Ghana cedis went into tax exemptions for a lot of these foreign entities. And year on year, every year, we're expected to lose about $2.2 billion. So when it comes to these tax exemptions, and then we are fighting for an e-levy and we're fighting for more tax and all of that, what do you think we can do? How does that rub off on you?
I think it's common sense, and
it is what common sense.
Yes, and the IMF has pointed it out clearly. In fact, even before the IMF, fighters on the was it December 1st? That was in 2021. In our press conference, it was one of the recommendations that we gave. That look, we cannot continue giving tax exemptions and tax holidays to multinationals and to companies. That we have to start being realistic, because when we go for loans, when we are out there, it's a real world, and so we have to deal with that, and possibly look at creating more alternatives in terms of how we engage. So, if you look at the amount of money we are losing to tax exemptions, then it's not as if we are getting any benefits for them. Anglo Gold Ashanti has been in this country for how many years? Newmont has been in this country for how many years? Now oil, onshore and offshore. So I think it's a fair call, and government, rather than busying itself with trying to introduce e-levy,
right?
Levy that has already kicked the bucket even before it was introduced. I think it should busy itself with looking at some of these suggestions and taking them on board.
Ernesto, thank you so much for joining the conversation. Let me just wrap with this headline. Daily Analyst, Ejra disturbances. Families get 500,000 Ghana cedis as compensation. I've seen you put out a statement on Kaka Macho, but that's something else that we'll be getting into sometime later on the show. But Ernesto, thank you once more for joining.
Most grateful.
All right, have a good day. And this is how we wrap it up on our news review. Well, thank you for staying with us on the AM show. We get into our big stories now as we start with throwing the spotlight on our economy. Now, this morning, we're going to be talking on how much Ghana actually received as financial support in the year 2020. We'll look at all sources, foreign, and also extend the analysis to 2021, the spillover into 2021, since similar grants and support poured into Ghana that year too, into our coffers. We're going to use government's own accounting data to make people understand this, to give you a proper breakdown of what exactly has happened. Our guests, Dr. John Kuma, Deputy Finance Minister. He joins the conversation. We also have Professor Lord Mensah, Finance Lecturer, University of Ghana Business School, and Dr. Patrick Assuming, Economist with the University of Ghana Business School. Gentlemen, let me say a very good morning to you. Do we have Dr. Suming? Okay, so I see you there. Dr. Suming, a very good morning to you, if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. Good morning, and good morning to viewers.
Right. Do we have John Kuma with us? Okay, so we'll also be joined by Professor Lord Mensah, Finance Lecturer at the University of Ghana Business School. So let's get into some of the data. Recently, for example, country representative of the World Bank, Mr. Laporte, was telling us that the World Bank had actually given us some $430 million, contrary to what we had heard earlier, about $100 million initially, to our country in its bid to fight COVID-19. So looking at so far the sources that we've come up with from the World Bank, from the IMF, and other donor groupings, you would realize that we have got quite a chunk of money, some in dollars, others in cedis. When you look at the trajectory, and I'll be walking you through some of the figures shortly, but what generally do you make of this, Dr. Suming?
Well, so it's the numbers obviously show that we received substantial amount of support from foreign partners. I think the numbers, as in the mid-year budget for 2021, show that we have received just under 26 billion Ghana cedis.
Right.
I think that's quite substantial. So, but at the same time, it also pales in comparison with what government was planning to spend under the Ghana Cares program. So, in some sense, that can also explain why we still have the gap that we have. But there's no two ways about it. I think over a period of a year or two, that substantial amount of revenue to be injected into the economy.
So looking at these inflows, we are looking at some 19.30 billion Ghana cedis. You spoke about the close to 26, but the breakdown from 2020, let's just take a look at that. The IMF accounting for 5.85 billion thereabouts, the World Bank with a bit over 1 billion, the European Union with a little less than, or a little over 500 million, ADB, African Development Bank as well, almost 500. The Bank of Ghana itself, when it comes to the local elements from which we've been borrowing, just about 10 billion. And of course, the Government of Ghana Contingency Fund also contributing a little over 1 billion. Now, some stretch it even further. Are you surprised in any way that on the back of the pandemic in 2020, we could amass all these sums of money? I mean, putting it into perspective, you look at our budgets over the last 2 years, let's say even 3 years, 2020, 2021, 2022, and we're hovering around 100 billion Ghana cedis. So to get close to 20 billion or more on the back of COVID-19 is very substantial, isn't it?
No, absolutely. It's very substantial, but I think we also have to understand that in the COVID, especially in 2020, a lot of economic activity shut down, so the government couldn't raise as much revenue as it usually would. So while this is substantial, I think if you look at also the fact that government needed to do a lot more social interventions in the period of the COVID, so you really should not look at just the inflows, look at what was happening on the domestic front. And we have to understand that all these additional inflows were given because our international partners understood that in the era of COVID, the economy wouldn't work the way it normally do. And for instance, government wouldn't collect as much revenue. And then also additional expenditures were made. I think the bigger one would be probably the COVID-19 vaccines that we needed to procure and the other forms of other equipment and supplies we needed to deal with the COVID. So in that sense, yes, it doesn't change the fact that it's a huge amount of inflows that the economy has received. But again, you have to balance it in terms of how much we couldn't raise domestically that we normally would.
There was a time when we're talking about, how much exactly government had spent, and that has become topical because from time to time we're told of some figures are put out there in terms of our expenditure on the back of COVID-19. What we've not been able to do is to fully paint a picture of how much of a dent COVID-19 has made on our economy, so we can gauge it and say this is actually what impact it has had on our economy negatively, of course. But any surprises? I remember some time back we put out some figures concerning government spending about 1.7 billion, on COVID, and there was a pushback. In fact, it was more, about 17 billion, 19 billion thereabouts. And the pushback was that, no, they had spent far less than that in actuality. So the point then is looking at what we have done with those funds, all of these funds that have accrued. Yes, our taxes, we overshot our target in 2021. But in 2020, of course, we had some shortfalls. But if you consider all that we've got versus what we've done with them, do you feel we have used these sums of money judiciously, Dr. Suming?
Well, I think one of the issues is that I'm not sure that every single thing that we spend the details have been completely made available for the Ghanaian public to be able to interrogate the numbers. So the other thing we also need to understand is that there's some fluidity in the rate at which the funds come in. I mean, all these funds don't come in a particular quarter or in a particular month. They spread over a period of time. In terms of how judiciously we've used the money, I think, it's the onus is on the government to be a little bit more transparent with the COVID expenditure than it has been at the moment. You will notice that in Parliament, there's been an attempt to get the government to give a little bit more detail about exactly what has gone in. But, in terms of what we have spent and where we are now, yes, on the broader side, we see that the economy is growing much faster than it was before in 2020. But we also see that where the social interventions were supposed to pushing Ghanaians don't seem to have happened much. The Ghana Statistical Service has been releasing some reports on the COVID impact. The most recent one has been households who, about at least a third of them, report that their incomes have been recovered from the pre-COVID era. And then we also see numbers about, close to 800,000 people who have lost their jobs in the COVID period. And all of these have not been recovered by the economy. So even though on the broader side, on the macro side, it appears that the GDP has recovered, but it's obvious that in terms of translation into the lives of ordinary Ghanaians, we haven't seen the improvement that we would have expected.
In terms of impact on the lives of ordinary Ghanaians, as Dr. Esuming says, we've not seen maybe the sort of results we would have wanted. We're also joined by John Kumar, who speaks on matters bordering on the economy. Honorable Kumar, thank you for joining the conversation, sir.
Thank you, Ben. Good morning to your viewers and listeners, too.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure having you. Of course, he is a Deputy Finance Minister as well. So let me just find out from you. One thing I feel we've not been able to do fully, as Dr. Esuming points out, is talk about the fact of all the expenditure up to date that we've had on the back of COVID-19 and put that side by side with the inflows that we have had. But as of now, though we are focusing on 2020, as of now, if I asked you, Honorable Kumar, to tell me how much have we got in total in our kitty on the back of COVID-19 from different institutions, and how much of it have we expended? What would you say in the most simple terms, explaining it to Ghanaians?
Yes, this was provided in the 2021 budget. So I'm surprised people say they haven't seen it.
You know why I put it that way, even before you go on. These same figures that we are talking of, they've been contested from different sources. You remember, I mean, if it's been in the media space where government says it has spent this, and people have also made not inquiries, but have said that it couldn't possibly be on the back of even the utilities that were given for free. So that is the backdrop for my question.
Yes, but Ben, if I contest that your name is not Ben, I should be able to tell you are John. So tell me, those who are contesting government figures, what alternative figures are they providing? If we want to discuss the economy based on context, then we won't make progress. I am saying that as government, this is what various institutions of government have put together. We put it before Parliament. If another person has another figure, then they should be bold to put it before Parliament so we can discuss it. But the accounting of it has been done in the 2021 budget. I told you that we had a revenue shortfall of 11.6 billion in 2020. And then we had unbudgeted expenditure, which we couldn't do anything about. In law, they say it was a force majeure of about 13.6 billion. So there was a gap of 25.5 billion in 2020. Now, that gap was filled by all these COVID support that we are talking about, the loans we took from the World Bank, IMF supported us, ADB, Bank of Ghana, and all these details have been provided in the 2021 budget in terms of how much was taken and how much or how every peswa or cedi of that fund was also expended in terms of provision of PPE, medical equipment, vaccination, of course, the provision of water and electricity, and all the interventions government did. Remember, throughout the COVID year, no public worker, not even one public sector worker, was laid off, even though there was lockdown and people were home. Government continued to pay everybody. We sustained the economy, all the flagship programs of government, including free SHS, NAPCO, nursing training allowance, teacher training allowance, all of them, afforestation, you can think about them. They were all carried through the difficult year. So, yes, if somebody wants to know how those COVID expenditures were done, they are all been accounted for in Parliament. It was part of the budget that was presented to Parliament in 2021. And the details of those expenditures have been given to Parliament.
Of course, the 11, almost 12 billion Ghana cedi end of year 2020 revenue shortfall. Yes, you make mention of some of those. But when you talk about, I am interested in the minutiae, the minute details when it comes to some of these figures. For example, I remember when the 50 plus million was spoken of in terms of procurement of PPE. Do you recall that?
Yes, I recall that.
Good. We weren't given specifics, the specifics that some of us in media and maybe generally would want about, details of the accurate numbers, which institutions got them, which people, where they were distributed to, that amounted to the 50 plus million. So do you get me now when I talk about...
No, I don't. Ben, I don't know who you spoke to. You know that COVID expenditures are done by the Ministry of Health. So tell me who in Ministry of Health you contacted. That didn't get
in terms of what?
In terms of what you are asking, the details you are looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Who did you talk to in Ministry of Health?
No, but you're referencing the budget, and that is exactly where I'm going back to. I'm not talking about the Ministry of Health.
Those information. The budget will give you the broader picture. So if you want to go beyond it to look for specifics, and then as a media, you talk to the ministry responsible for that.
Would it not have been maybe to keep things above the board to add those details, or is it that in a budget statement those are unnecessary because those are some of the very things circulating in the that people are asking questions about?
They are unnecessary. They are very necessary, but they are as part of the processes of reporting. There are different levels. Okay, so if the Ministry of Finance in its budget have to account for how every penny is spent by every ministry, we are going to have about maybe 100,000 pages of the budget. So what we do is to take summary of every ministry and how they are spent it. But the details fit to the ministry, and that is why audit service will subsequently go in to audit. You said we spent 10,000 on PPE. Where are the receipts? What were the processes of procurement? Who were in charge? So all those things are done. But there are different levels of accountability in the legal process. I don't know if you get the picture. So what you are asking for are available, but it means you have to engage the right institutions, the structure of governance, before you can get that information.
Right. So let's veer into other territory. I'll be getting shortly into the matter of the ratings we received in recent times, and what your reaction is to some of those, because they also impact our finances as a country. But just to clarify with you, when Mr. Laporte, the World Bank country representative, says that we've secured some $430 million from the World Bank, that's what they've given to us. And instead of the 100 million that we've been talking about all of this while. Is that correct information coming from the World Bank country representative? Just to clarify with you.
But please, it's correct. But who said we've been talking about $100 million?
Well, we have even had some of your members of parliament come into the studio, and they insist it's 100 million. So there's been that bit of a discrepancy about how much the World Bank has given
please,
up to this point. Even as of Honorable Kuma, even as of last week, if I recall, that was the story.
Oh no, it's not true. If you check the 2021 budget, and like I'm saying, sometimes World Bank continues to give us support. yes, there was a specific $100 million for PPEs, but
Right.
that's not the total expenditures on COVID. Then there was this, what I just explained to you, the 25 billion gap. One of the revenue sources we used was the support from the World Bank, the $450 million you are talking about. And it's been captured in the budget and accounted for on how it was expended. Okay, so it is not true that Ghana didn't account for it. Maybe we are talking about another $100 million for PPE, because I've seen that particular credit facility from the World Bank. But it does not mean that the COVID period we didn't get this 400 million. We got it. We announced it. We accounted for it in the 2021 budget. It was part of how we solved the 25 billion gap.
All right. So the 100 million, of course, part of the bigger figure, 430 million, which is the 2.58 billion Ghana cedi equivalent, all factoring into the 25 plus billion that we are talking about.
Exactly.
Okay. Let me come to Professor Lord Mensah before I come back to you, Honorable
Oh,
John
my
Kumar.
greetings to Prof.
All right. Prof, good morning. Is Professor Lord Mensah with us? All right. So,
yes, good morning, Ben.
Right, Prof. Thank you for joining. For a moment, I thought you had pulled a fast one on us.
Yeah, I was on mute. That's
Right. Good to have you. So you've seen the figures, and so far we're talking about some 25 plus billion Ghana cedis that we've got on the back of COVID-19. And recently, like I was mentioning to Honorable Kumar, the World Bank clarifying that we've got some $430 million from them. When you look at all of what we have got so far on the back of COVID-19, the shocks to our system and what we've expended these on in terms of our budget, does it justify where we find ourselves economically now, looking at the nuancing we're getting in terms of even our credit ratings? In other words, have we spent these sums of money judiciously per where you sit?
Well, that's a very good question that every Ghanaian may want to know, want to have the answer to it. If you look at what is happening on the ground, remember when COVID came in, there was an economic dip. I mean, we saw kind of a stagnating economic activity, a situation where the agents within the economy, we're talking about, human flows, we're talking about businesses running around, even the government economic activities all got frozen. Now, if you look at this for about a month, that there was no movement within the economy. There was a dip. I remember at that time our GDP dropped to almost 2% thereabout. And so having been lifting the economy from that 2% to upwards, now we're talking about 4%. It tells you that we have spent, the money that that was earmarked for the recovery from this natural, situation of COVID. I can tell you that yes, we have spent. It could be that the people are not feeling it, and genuinely, that is why people are calling for where is the money and where did we spend it? Government may be spending, but the question is whether we're spending to hit, the sensitive part of the economy that will make people feel that spending. Very, very important. You should understand that most of the PPEs that are used in fighting this COVID are imported PPEs. And how many people import, those PPEs? They are not, economic imports that are likely to create that kind of chains of economic activities within the country. If you are importing, vaccine, the vaccine comes straight and then it is injected to the people. So maybe from the airport straight to the hospitals, it will not create this kind of economic activity. So it is more or less money that has been received, but because A typical Ghanaian is into that kind of chain of production when it comes to vaccine production. We will not feel it as expected. But then it's money that has been spent. Let me also put this on record. When the COVID happened, I indicated that we shouldn't mix up the COVID spending with our national flow of spending. We had a situation where, we mixed it up, and like the Deputy Finance Minister is saying, John is saying, we should go into the budget. I mean, the budget is quite bulky, but having COVID as a special case, a situation that does not happen often, we shouldn't have mixed its spending and its inflows to the usual spending that we do. Because when it happens like that, you create that kind of a murky situation where people will find it difficult to appreciate your spending in relation to the flows that were coming in. So I was expecting that we would treat that kind of spending as a special one, have its own, special accounts, have its own inflows. So even as part of the budget readings, or as time goes on in the Kenyan interaction with the finance ministry, they will be releasing this, information at the website of the finance ministry, so that we can pick it up and say, okay, fine, this is how much came in, and this is how we have spent the money. But I'm telling you that, okay, fine, we may have spent those monies, but in the end, because Ghana, the Ghanaian economy is not structured to fit into that kind of COVID-related production, we may not feel it as expected. And, that is basically how it stands.
Right. Honorable Kumar, just a quick one, John Kumar, on what Prof is saying. Do you agree with him that the disaggregation in terms of COVID spending or COVID financing versus what exactly we've done in our budget, the disaggregation may not have been done in the sort of way that we should have, to ensure that we know exactly how much has gone into COVID and what exactly the gains have been along the way? Do you agree with him?
Yes, I agree with Prof to a large extent, except to say that the laws as crafted in our PFM, Public Financial Management Act, and our Constitution in terms of requirements for accountability to Parliament, unfortunately, may not envisage an issue of a pandemic and how you spend and how you account. So we are all boxed into one rule about how you have to go to Parliament within a specific period and then account for all revenues and expenditures that you have received. So, all revenues you have received and expenditures that you have made. But of course, like he rightly advised, you then have to specify on how much specifically was spent on COVID. And that is clearly provided in the budget. If you pick the 2021 budget, you can go on. In fact, it's even the last page of the budget to make it very easy for everybody. When you pick 2021 budget, go to the last page. You'll find COVID expenditures. How much revenues came? Where did we get it from? How much was expended? In fact, out of the 25 billion that the gap gave, we were able to raise, I think, 19.5 billion through the World Bank, ADB, IMF, and Bank of Ghana also gave the asset purchasing financing of 10 billion cedis. All of those ones are provided there. So you are able to know the various sources of funding and how it was done. But the deeper information, as Ben, you were requesting earlier, in terms of when you say you spent, let's say, 1 billion cedis on PPE, what were those PPEs and where did you purchase them from? Who were the suppliers? That one has to be received from a Ministry of Health. They will tell you the number of hospitals in Ghana, the various COVID centers they created, how much went where. And there was frontline health workers, special incentives that were provided by government. If you want to see the beneficiaries of those who received the money, it will not be found in the budget. You have to go to Ministry of Health and apply for those specific information. Who are the doctors and nurses on our front line? Is it true that they receive those support from government? And that kind of thing. We talked about secondary schools that are open at the time. They have to go back to school. So if Ministry of Education says that we supplied 100,000 of these nose masks or what do you call it, a liquid for hand sanitizer, I want to say hand sanitizer. They provided hand sanitizers and all kinds of things. So if you want the specific details in terms of quantity and specific cost, the Ministry of Finance, per our budgeting rules and laws, we cannot take those specific ones to Parliament. But of course, once we go to Parliament, the budget is referred to the various committees of Parliament. So the Health Committee, that is where the details will now come, and they will invite the minister, come and give us the specific details of how you said you spent this COVID money. You understand?
Right.
So all those accounting processes have been followed according to the provisions of the PFM Act and the Constitution and all other relevant financial laws of our land.
Right. Does that suffice for you, very briefly, Professor Lord Mensah, does that suffice for you in terms of explaining what we find in the budget?
Yeah, well, once the PFM will not allow that kind of separation, obviously there's nothing you can do about it. Yes, that seems to be, but you see, we spent. Well, the question is, we've been spending, and then when you go into the budget, you're going to see all those itemized things that we've spent on. But the question would be that, did we spend, to in the areas that possibly we will say that they build up into the economy as expected? Effectively, probably that is why we're not seeing that kind of expenditure at the levels of the ordinary. And that is why Ghanaians are questioning maybe the inflows that came up recently from the World Bank report and all. They're asking whether indeed we spent those monies in the system or not. Clearly, I appreciate that. Of course, we're not part of the COVID-related chain of production, and so therefore, even if there's an expenditure, we may not feel it in the Ghanaian system, and that is why probably we're complaining that we've spent, but we don't see that spending in that regard.
Dr. Suming, let me bring you in at this point as we discuss two crucial issues that I want us to look at before we draw the curtains on the conversation. One has to do with tax exemptions. And recently, again, from the country representative of the World Bank, Pierre Laporte, he made mention of the fact that, one, we seem to be giving too many tax exemptions. And of course, we have our own shortfalls when it comes to tax collection, and all of that inimical to our economy. You would also want to pay attention to the fact that His Excellency, the President, in one of his State of the Nation addresses, did mention that we're facing a problem when it comes to the wide tax exemptions that we give, that in a period of 16 years, we could really see maybe even half of our GDP being given out in terms of these tax exemptions. So the cost of tax exemptions to our system, we want money to shore up the economy, yet we're giving out so much in terms of tax exemptions. How do you react to that?
Yes, I think, the issue about tax exemption has been with us for a long time. Actually, when we were under the IMF program, the last Extended Credit Facility program, it was a major topic for discussion. And, to be fair, this government seems to have made some attempts. I think the exemption bill has been laid in the past, and it is in the current budget, in the 2022 budget, there's been a promise that it's going to be relayed. So let us hope that indeed the exemptions bills are relayed, and there's a broader discussion about, who we are giving these exemptions to, and there's a comprehensive reform. We need to understand for every CD of exemption we're giving to any company, what we are getting in return. Not that, we just leave a lot of discretionary powers for our government officials to just grant exemptions. So I think, we've been told that the exemptions bill will be relayed, and we are all looking forward to it, and then see how much revenue we will get, because exemptions that we give, if we were to stop it, we raise more revenue than we raise in the e-levy that we are trying to introduce.
Right.
So it's good. The government has acknowledged that. The president has spoken about that. I'm just a little surprised about how long it has taken, given how long the discussion started. But let's see, maybe they are trying to be more extensive with the consultation and make sure that the coverage is as wide as it should be.
John, do you? I'm sure you don't disagree with what the World Bank country rep has said, but to what extent do you agree with him, and what can we do? He proposes, for example, that we should look at property tax. We have our property rates and what we're doing with them this year, but to what extent do you agree with him, and how do you think we can claw our way out of having so many of these big businesses going scot-free when it comes to tax waivers?
I totally agree with the World Bank rep and a representative, and of course with Dr. Mensah. And it's not only them, Parliament itself. I appear before the Finance Committee regularly, and I know the posture and concern of members of Parliament when it comes to tax exemption. And the good news is that the bill is now laid in Parliament. That is even in November of this last year. So hopefully we will see the end to the needless tax exemptions that always have to go out in terms of our negotiations with development partners and export credit facilities that come into our country. So yes, it's something we all agree that something has to be done about it, and steps are being taken to address or reduce substantially the issues of tax exemption.
Maybe to wrap the conversation, but before that, Prof, do you have a quick reaction to this before we get into the bit about the recent rating and wrap the conversation? Professor Mensah, I think you may have to unmute again.
Hello, can you hear me, please?
Great, I can hear you.
Right. We need to look at these tax exemptions very well because when you give incentives or tax exemption, it's more or less deferring what the country is supposed to rake in immediately. But then as you defer it, you're thinking that, okay, given those exemptions, there could be that kind of chain of increase in economic production so that you benefit from that, direction. But you see, let me chip in this. It's unfortunate that we don't really have a special policy for this, tax exemptions, because you give tax exemption purposely to rake in something in the future, and it's for a tenure. It's not a permanent thing that needs to be, that needs to be exploited. And then also, we also need to, move away from that kind of political promise of tax exemptions. Because when you tie tax exemptions to politics, it becomes difficult, to restore, the situation when, it comes to a point where it's not beneficial anymore. So for me, we need to relook at it and come up with a policy. So if we are giving tax exemptions to a particular company, why are we giving the tax exemption? What are we going to get in return in the next 4 years? So the tax exemptions will last for only 4 years. We need to look at all this and then come up with a strong policy in that direction.
Right. Gentlemen, let's just do this. I'll give you a minute each, just to be fair, to each one of you. It has to do with the recent ratings. We've heard from Standard & Poor's, and now Moody's has also come in, so to speak, to make the mood even worse. They are giving us a C rating. I'll start with you, John. I know government, had some interactions with Moody's, but it appears they did not look at the sovereigns on the African continent, how much COVID had affected our economies, and they still gave us a C. Your quick reaction to that?
Yes, but that is the hypocrisy of these rating agencies. Sometimes it's difficult to appreciate. We all know how COVID has negatively impacted virtually all economies.
and you unfairly, still in the midst of COVID, in this pandemic, global pandemic, want to break people down to worsen their economic situation. Well, Ghana particularly has rejected these ratings from Moody's. We have issued a statement. Just on 22nd January 2022, they appointed the lead Ghana analyst, Juan Villa-Lucy, who has never even traveled to Ghana before. You sit before your desktop and look at documents and downgrade a country without even fiscally engaging the people.
Are you suggesting Moody's manufactured these figures, that they did not do the right due diligence?
The basis, we don't agree with the basis of those analyses. And we have made it plainly to them that, first of all, you cannot seek to downgrade a country in the midst of this pandemic when all your basis of this downgrade is that Ghana has overspent in COVID. I want to ask, which country in the world has not overspent because of COVID? Why are they not downgrading the European and American economy? It's just hypocritical, and I don't think we should give attention to this kind of negative propaganda against Africa.
Right. Okay. Thank you for succinctly addressing that. Prof. Mensah?
Yeah, I mean, Ben, I think the reaction from the government circles is quite unfortunate because these agencies don't change their models, right? The models they're using to create great companies, great sovereign entities like Ghana, I mean, across Africa, everywhere, I mean, remains the same. They don't change their gradings because it's COVID. The only difference is that the parameters that are feeding into the model they use have changed. So if you spend more, I mean, in COVID, and it gives you a future that indicates that you will struggle to pay your debt, it gives you a future that indicates that, you know, COVID may have affected your production, so therefore you are not likely to pay your debt. I mean, obviously you'll be downgraded. What we have to do is that we have to relate the downgrading of Ghana to other African countries and look at on the continent whether we've all been downgraded to a certain margin or not. Then we'll be able to appreciate what is happening on the ground. But I can tell you that the investor will not, you know, understand an information that will come from, you know, the government that is managing the economy, but rather they will rely on the information that these rating agencies gives them, because they've been relying on them to take their decision all this while. Why is it that the previous times when they were grading us, we never came out? And we should also understand that for these rating agencies, we call something solicited rating and then unsolicited, you know, rating. What African countries do is what? Solicited. We hide them more or less because we want to get our information out there to the public, to the investment public, so that when we go to the market, the investor already has certain levels of information with us.
Right.
They've been grading all this while. So why at this time this reaction? I mean, for me, I will advise that the government does not go on to react to this grading, but rather accept it as a transition.
Okay. Because
it's unfortunate that we've not been in this C transition before. All this while, I think the minimum we've come to was B minus with a negative outlook. It's unfortunate, you know, and we should understand that COVID is a natural disaster.
Right.
Every indicator on the economies are going to change. It's
Right.
not going to be the same as we know. So it's an exceptional situation. We should just accept that and then get to know that it is a transition.
Okay.
And because it's a transition, when we put up very good measures, we may lift ourselves up from this situation.
Prof, thank you. Dr. Esuming, you get 1 minute as well. Hopefully you'll do a minute and then we can say goodbye to this discussion.
Yes. Well, I'm also quite surprised at the reaction of government to the ratings. Reading the report, I thought that the Moody's ratings was actually quite magnanimous to the government, because they said that they've kept our outlook as stable because of the government pre-pandemic track record of effective policies and effective policy management. So I'm quite surprised that the Deputy Finance Minister is at the reaction generally. But I mean, the substance of what is there, I don't think there's much to dispute in terms of how the fact that when we collect revenue, almost half is going to service interest. And the fact that, you know, in the 2022 budget, we are going to rely more on domestic financing, the fact that it has the potential to crowd out the private sector, the fact that interest costs are going to go up, because we are expecting that the interest rates are going to go up, because the monetary policy rate will be expected to go up. It's already gone up in the last 3 months or so. And then around the world, we are all projecting that because inflation pressures are going up around the world, interest costs, many banks, central banks will raise their rates. So for me, I wasn't quite surprised at the downgrade. I expected that, because the information that is being used to evaluate the economy is very similar. So I think maybe what we should do is to step up our effort to convince and show that we have a plan to bring the public finances back to where it should be, rather than trying to criticize the rating agencies. Because as my colleague said, when they rate us positively, we don't complain. And then when they rate us negatively, then we are criticizing them.
Thank you, gentlemen. And as I say goodbye to you, it's interesting. So Honorable John Kumar says, nothing to write home about. Don't pay attention to what they are saying. They're being unfair. Dr. Assuming, you say you are even surprised it wasn't worse. And you see what Professor Mensah has been saying, that we shouldn't fight with them. We should take it in good faith. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining the conversation. Dr. Patrick Assuming, economist with the University of Ghana Business School, Professor Lord Mensah, lecturer at the University of Ghana Business School, and of course, Honorable John Kumar, Deputy Finance Minister. Thank you so much for making the time to join us. So we proceed from here to our very next big story, and it has to do with the e-travel card. We'll be bringing you details of that as we host Dr. Gideon Boakon, who is with the Office of the Vice President. He speaks on these matters, and he's going to be walking us through what exactly this means moving forward. That will happen right after the break. Please stay. Thank you for staying with us. It's all about the e-travel card. I wish I had one to show you, but I'm not a government official and I'm not traveling anywhere on the back of government business. But how is this going to impact our work in the country? How is it going to ensure that we can stem the tide of any activities, financially speaking, that we would not have wanted? The Vice President launched it, and we have joining us in the studio Dr. Gideon Boakon, who is an economic advisor and spokesperson at the Office of the Vice President, to give us the nitty-gritty, the fine details. Dr. Boakon, a very good morning to you.
Hi, Ben. Good morning. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Should I say Happy New Year?
Well, for the first time this year, so it's only fitting, though we're in the second month already. Yeah. Why this e-travel card? Why?
Yeah, this is one of the, I should say, pet projects of the Vice President. The digitization and digitalization drive that we've been pursuing are basically aimed to improve government service deliveries and also make sure that we have proper controls on the public finances, and also not have government monies, people's monies, go down the drain on the back of expenditures of government officials. And so of all the digitization agenda that we've been pursuing, we also felt that there's a need not just to look at how the public, interact with government through government services, but also how government interacts with the public and how government spends public funds. And so we did this to cure a certain, problem within our public sector budgeting and financing systems. As it pertains until this e-travel card came, if a government official wants to travel and you are given some accountable inputs, to cater for your accommodation, to cater for your travel expenses, including feeding and other things that are approved,
accommodation
that are approved. But we used to do all of that since independence with cash. So if you're a government official and you're traveling, and the MDA will write to whatever Minister of Finance, everything, controller approves everything. If you have to be given, let's say, $500, you're traveling outside the country, the $500 is given to you.
Right, in cash.
So you go, and then you spend the money according to plan. Then you come back, and then you go back and retire whatever is left. But
and that is one of the thorny areas, right? Exactly. Because do you normally get that, people coming back to return any leftovers?
I don't know much about what happens at the end in so many settings, but I know for where I work, and personally myself, anytime I have traveled and I come back, I have to go and retire my impress. If there are leftovers, I have to give it. If I exceeded and I have proper justification for that, I make a case for that. But we are humans, and we know, we hear things in certain quarters. Somebody may travel, and the person will have to go and, let's say, lodge at a hotel and finds a place, like a friend or whatever, sleeps.
They don't go to the hotel and all of that.
Pockets the money. It's government money. Once you don't use it, you have to bring it back to government. And so we've had these problems with us. And a lot of the time, we see a lot of government money going into individual pockets through this. And that is why you go to so many ministries, departments, and agencies, and foreign travels is like a hot cake for everybody. When it comes, oh, I want to go, and then people even scheme to get it to their favorites. Now, what we have decided to do, and this is basically something we work on from the Vice President's Office, Minister of Finance and Controller, to make sure that every government official who is mandated to travel outside the country will not be given cash. Rather, the ministry or department or agency will apply to controller, and once controller approves and it is taken through the GIFMIS process, controller will then load how much you're supposed to be giving for that travel onto a card. Now, once the card is issued to you, just like a bank credit card, when they are doing this, I think, with Fidelity Bank.
Right.
So the bank will issue the card.
So it's one specific bank you're going to be using for now,
so,
or that's...
For now, I think it's Fidelity Bank. The bank will issue the card, and if you have to be given 500 cedis as a countable impress, the 500 cedis will be, cedis will be loaded. The equivalent of that will be loaded on the card. Then once you travel, every single expenditure you make, controller will have a track of that. Anything you buy. So if you go and use the card to purchase anything that you're not allowed to use the card for, controller will see. So if you go and sleep in a hotel and the bill comes, it will reflect on controller systems with the hotel's name attached to it and everything. So there's that level of transparency. So once you come back, you go to the accountant in your office to retire the impress, and then controller will print the bank statement for that particular account, and then show you that when you traveled, you were given, let's say, 50 cedis for taxi. I mean, inbound travels. You exceeded that. Instead of picking, let's say, a yellow cab, you went to pick
a black cab.
A black cab,
which is
that
more
is
expensive.
More expensive. Why did you do that? If controller or the accounting people realizes that you have to, pay back some monies to government, you'll be made to do so. So
in this instance, one of the bits about transparency is that it will also make it possible for you to see the back end of the person's expenditure.
Exactly.
And if the person has exceeded without justification, this person would have to make payment.
You have to pay back. So
interesting.
We do that so that there are proper checks and balances. Okay, and that transparency in the government budgeting and budgetary allocations is brought to bear. The other thing is also to curb the problem of corruption. So many things happen within the ministries, departments, and agencies. And so far as this does not go for only politicians, So far as you work for government, you're a civil servant or public servant, when you're traveling, these things are done. So you and the accounting person at your office cannot collude, you know, to take government monies for your own advantage.
Right.
And I'm saying this because it is possible that somebody is supposed to travel, the person is entitled to, let's say, $500, but ends up getting, say, $1,000 because, you know, and finds a way to remit whoever he has to pay a certain percentage to. This time around, every request that has to be made must be approved by controller. And once controller approves, it is controller that will disburse the funds to you through the card. And once the card is issued to you, controller then has a track of every single expenditure that you make with the card.
A quick question there. That would also mean more work for the controller, right? And I mean, with all these inflows, imagine the number of people that travel. I know sometimes there are freezes on traveling and all of that, but with a pool of people that travel from time to time, maybe COVID has lowered that. Is this not going to put some pressure on the controller and accountant general?
Yes, but it's manageable, and that's why if there's a need for controller to, you know, even recruit more people to save the public purse, then we have to do that. Because we cannot as a country sit down unconcerned and allow taxpayers' money to be used by a few individuals at the expense of the majority like that. So we need to get this thing done. And in any system that we have such checks and balances, it puts people to check. And once people know that this card I'm holding is more or less like a CCTV camera on my travel expenses, they become careful. Because sometimes people travel and they make certain expenditures, and you ask yourself, does a person have that money? You know, you don't know where it's coming from, but for all you know, if he's given $1,000 and supposed to spend $200 out of it, and he spends $600, he comes back, nobody even questions the person, come and retire the accounts. People may not even do that, but this time around, it's going to be done. Once you come back and you retire, if you're a frequent traveler, controller may decide to leave the card with you, such that the next time you are traveling and your funds are approved, then they will just load it in the system and you hold the card. But it also means that once you come and retire the accounts, you can't use the card to do anything within the country. And even if you travel outside the country, the accounts will not be operational unless it is reactivated for you. If you are not...
Are these going to be individual cards that the individuals will hold, or is it going to be that as and when you need to travel, then this will be given you? Because there are different dynamics.
There are two sides of it. If you are a frequent traveler, for instance, the president is a frequent traveler, the vice president may be a frequent traveler, finance minister or foreign affairs minister is a frequent traveler. So for them, once you come back and you retire, the card may be with you. But once you've retired the accounts, the card is made inactive. So you can't even use it, even though there may be funds on it, you can't use it for anything.
Until the next
time you are traveling, a request has to be made for controller to approve. And once controller approves and loads funds on it, or says how much is on it is enough, then controller will reactivate that. It is at that time that you can use the card to make transactions again. If you're not a frequent traveler like me, when you come back and retire the accounts, controller will take the card back. Because the card is also reusable by other agents. It is not linked to your name.
That is what I wanted you to clarify.
Exactly. So controller may take the card so that tomorrow, if Ben, you are also traveling, there's an approval for you, controller would not have to go and print a new card.
They can give me the same card.
The same card for you to
But only that, in that instance, it is my name that will be there. It will be an account created
created for you. So any transactions that you make, any expenditure that you make, controller will have it reflected on his system by by appending it to you, so they know that this transaction or expenses were made by you. And then once you come and also retire, they take the card. Any other person can use it. Just like hotel, room cards. Anybody can use it depending on how they face it into the system.
And another quick one, right before you go on. I hope, I believe you've answered that bit. So the vice president and the president, for example, carrying these cards. So it means, yes, we'll have a log of their expenses as they travel based on what has been allotted to them. Some people would say a national security issue. Other people are fully aware of what their expenses are, what they are doing. Is that a concern?
No. If you're a public officer, you're a public officer. The president and the vice president are not mandated to use public funds to do things that are in secrecy. You understand? So that level of transparency must start from the top. And that's
I'm only asking this because in other instances, like presidential travels and stuff, you know what people have said, and some of the justifications we've got on the floor of Parliament. Oh, this is a national security issue and all of that. So I'm just wondering whether some of these expenses as well don't fall into that.
Basically, if you travel, I mean, I've been traveling with the vice president outside the country. I don't see anything that he does so extraordinary, because you go, and I can tell you a lot of the time, he may not even have to hold the card. Because a lot of the time, I mean, and as far as I know, anytime we travel, expenses by the vice president are done by the protocol officer who goes with us. Because he pays for his hotel room, he pays for his lunch or dinner, breakfast always given, complimentary. And the vice president cannot go, or the president cannot go and use public funds to go and buy a shirt. you understand?
Right.
If you want to buy a shirt, or you want to buy something that is personal for yourself, you have to use your own funds. You see, it's basically the accommodation, your feeding. And if you have to be given what they call per diem or
right.
something ahead, all those ones are checked, approved, you sign in the manual system or in the car system that we hold. If we travel and I'm entitled to per diem, the protocol director who travels with us, he comes with some form of a payment voucher. You sign before he gives it to you. So you don't have that liberty to use the funds to do anything that you want. So I don't think there's anything, shrouded in secrecy that the president or the vice president may have to do, for which reason their cars must be treated as a national security matter. There's nothing like that at all. And like I said, anytime we travel, if the vice president has to pay for hotel or food or anything, the payment is done by the protocol officer. So I don't see him holding government cash or anything. There's a protocol directors who will do all those things on their behalf. So that level of transparency is key for us as a country going forward, because a lot of the time we have government funds going to individual pockets just like that. And there's no means to track them. There's no means to account for them. So this is one of the key, reasons why we are aggressively pursuing digitalization. A lot of the time, people do not realize the immediate impact of all that we are doing. You saw last week or so when Vice President visited the National Service Scheme, how the deployment of a digital technology has helped them save about 112 million cedis that could have otherwise gone to people who are not entitled to receive payment. And it's happening across board. So if we're able to do this across all sectors, we'll be able to save a lot of money. I have said, and I still maintain, that if as a country we are able to put the proper systems in place, you don't need a good president, or let's say a president so righteous, quote unquote, to get the country moving. Because if the systems are working so efficiently and effectively, even if you have somebody who is so much having bad intentions, the system will smoke the person out. So we need these systems in place to get things moving. The other thing that this also does for us is the control and the lessening pressure on our foreign exchange, currency. Because as it stands, if government officials are traveling and they're entitled to anything, we have to go and change our cedis to buy dollar at expensive rate. You understand? This time around, you don't need to do that. Government loads cedis on your accounts. So in the bank accounts, it's government accounts, it's cedis. If you travel to US and you have to purchase anything in dollars, the exchange rate is done. Government does not have to go and buy dollars for the dollar to feel I'm important. There's so much demand coming for me, so my price must shoot up intrinsically, automatically. So this also has, in some way, has some control on the manner in which our local currency fares with other international trading currencies. So it's all in all a good thing for Ghana, and I think we need to applaud Finance Ministry, Controller, and of course, the gentleman in the Vice President's office, supported by the Vice President himself and his vision, pushing this agenda to make sure that we use the digital tools and the know-how that we have to save and protect the public purse.
Let me just ask you this. So then we're going to be able to really follow what expenses government officials are making out there when they travel. But maybe thinking in light of the right to information law, is this information going to be accessible? Let's say, Dr. Gideon Boako, you travel, and yes, the controller will know what the details are of your expenses, but I am sitting here and maybe I've got wind of certain information and I want to get those details. Are those details going to be available to someone like me or the ordinary Ghanaian on the street who is curious about how much you spent on your last trip?
To the extent that the right to information law, should I say bill or law, to the extent that the right to information law allows you to get that information, you can have access to it. Why not? Because I don't think this is exempt from any other information that the public may want to get, and I don't see anything so extraordinary about expenditure, travel expenditure by government officials. I mean, once you're a government official, you're a government official. Once you're a public official, you're a public official. Anything that you use the public funds for, people must have visibility into that. There should be that level of transparency. And that's the reason why we're doing this. You understand? So I think it is important, not just government appointees, even the civil servant, chief director, whoever travels.
The technocrats. He
comes back. And Ben wants to write to the ministry requesting for the travel expenditure of this particular person when he traveled to Dubai or he traveled to South Africa to, undertake some government business. That information must be available to the public because it is our money. It is our funds. You understand? You see, if we don't let information to flow and we create a system of such a heightened information asymmetry, then it leaves room for people to speculate and think about things and begin to do things that you may not like, even as a government. So as a government, one way of satisfying the people is not just about building roads or schools or anything. That cure of information asymmetry and making sure that information flow, people have access to information, it soothes people's hearts. Once I see that there's that level of transparency and I can have the confidence and assurance that the tax I pay to government will be put to judicious use and will not be used by a few people at the expense of the majority. If I'm asked to pay tax, then I will pay. That's what we have to do.
By what is the stretch of the pool of people that this is going to cover? I am thinking, for example, as you spoke, the Right Honourable Bagman, Speaker of Parliament, is out of the country seeking assistance when it comes to his health. Some people have complained about his going out, but that is a different issue. Is that to say, for example, that there could be a time in the future when, if the Speaker had to travel, he would be bearing this card? I mean, does he fall into that category?
Why not? He has to.
Right. Okay. Because if the President and Vice are going to have a card.
The Vice President has been issued his card. I don't know when the Vice President is going to travel, but I'm sure the next time the Vice President is going to travel, this card will have to be activated for him to use it. And likewise, any other person, from the President to the cleaner at the ministry or department or agency.
So it means if this had been done prior to the Speaker's latest travel, he would have been bearing this card and we can know what exactly his expense or his expenses.
I think that was going to be done.
Right.
You see, and we shouldn't take this for granted. There's so much commitment from the President and the Vice President's side to get this thing executed. And that is why the Vice President decided to get the first card, just by showing us example that, look, we mean this, we are committed to it, and we have to do it. Because we can even talk about things hypothetically. We don't know how much, government spends on travels on public officials. It can be a huge amount of money. And we don't have to let this thing become another channel through which people pocket, public funds.
Right.
And like I said, we hear about news from different ministries, department agencies. People travel, come back, and don't even retire their accounts. This time around, with this, digital technology and the e-card that we have launched, we're going to make it quite uncomfortable for anyone who has the intent to use public funds to his private advantage at the expense of the public through this means. This is something that the Vice President is so much particular about.
So it's going to
President is so much keen about it, and we're going to make sure that we get this thing done to save the public purse. The little money that we have as a country. Somebody told me, one of my former lecturers told me that the problem with Africa is that we are poor as a continent, but individually people are rich. The same thing applies to Ghana. We are poor as a country, but individuals are richer.
So this is to cure that. Let me just ask though, curious thought. We have card this, card that, e this, e that everywhere. I was just wondering, our Ghana card, it even is supposed to have an e-passport component and all of that. In regenerating, like this is an entirely new creation, e-travel card. Did we contemplate maybe fusing this into the Ghana card so that when I bear my Ghana card, after all, both government officials and non-government officials are going to have to get the Ghana card for those who don't have it yet. So did we contemplate, how about we just feed this into the Ghana card for individuals? Do you get it? Those who are currently working with government, it's fed into your Ghana card. When you are not traveling or when you're no longer with government as a worker, it's taken out. I mean, wouldn't that have been a simpler way to do this?
I'm not too sure we want to get there now. There are two different things. The Ghana card serves the purpose of identification, traceability, and all of that. This one is more of a transactional nature. This is like a credit card, a bank credit card. It does not in any way authenticate your identity or your traceability. And so
but it does. Your identity, in fact, that is what fits into your traceability.
It does, but in a manner that will be universally acceptable. And that is why if you go to a bank to execute any transaction and you produce your ATM card or your credit card, that is not admitted there, you understand? So the Ghana card has its own unique features. And like you said, it's going to be our e-passport. And that's also something the Vice President said at the Ashesi lecture. And people didn't seem to get it. People thought it's not possible, but I can assure you, within this week, you hear news about Ghana card being accepted as e-passport by ACAO. And that one will come, we'll talk about that. And so if along the line we see reason why the transactional component of a national identity card has to be brought to bear, I think if it makes sense, we have to do that. But as it stands now, this card we're talking about is going to be a card that will be issued by a bank, as a credit card or debit card will serve the same purpose. And so as it stands, it's not integrated into the Ghana card, as though when you have the Ghana card, you can also use it to purchase things and other things. I'm not too sure how that integration will play out, but I'm sure if there's prudence in that, there's cost efficiency in that, and it's manageable, it can be done along the line. I'm not too sure of a country that has a card that can also be used at the same time, national identity card that can be used at the same time for transaction purposes. I'm not too aware of that. Yeah.
Moving forward, maybe if there's prudence in that, and if we can save on it, maybe that's an approach we might.
Insofar as there's prudence, it's cost efficient, it's user friendly, and would not create problems for the country. If it comes, it's something we can embrace.
What would you say is have we estimated the savings, for example, that we can get out of this new process? Have we put a figure to it, or do we have an idea that maybe from what we see on the back end, a lot of people, let's say 30% of those traveling are actually not retiring their cards. We may be losing X sum of money, and with these new cards, though yes, we're going to be printing new cards with certain features, but this is what we hope to get at the end of the day in terms of savings as a country. Do we know?
Not for now. I know between Controller and Finance Ministry, they are working on some metrics, but I'm not too sure whether they have information as to how much savings the country will be making. But of course, and I'm sure once they start and then deploy the cards to a few individuals, they travel and come back and they juxtapose that against their previous travels, they'll be able to come up with some savings, amount. And definitely this is going to save us some money. But I cannot say with certainty, as I sit here, how much savings the country is going to make from this. Yeah.
Another curious thought. Is there any entity, I mean, when it comes to the e-levy, and I'm talking about because there's this, that. At least we've seen the example of some other countries, and we have decided to go in a certain direction. When it comes to this e-travel card, are there any countries whose example we're following, maybe looking at their system and saying, well, we can learn from them? It said that you shouldn't reinvent the wheel. There are always examples. Are there any that we are following? Because I'm looking at even the advanced countries, and some of them, yes, they have card systems, but there are other instances where cash is also given. So I'm just trying to reconcile what we're learning from here.
I mean, you go to so many countries and they're trying to go cashless and in so many dimensions. And for those countries, hardly would you see a government official traveling and being given cash. So they have the system running already. We are laggards, but of course, we just have to quicken our steps to catch up. So we're not doing this in isolation. There are best examples for us to follow. And we've also learned from how much they are saving. And that is what is also pushing us to make sure we follow, but not just copycat, but follow and design the system to suit our own, dynamics. And that is exactly what we are doing. And I think the idea and the quest to go cashless is something that all nations have embraced, just that others go at it at a very slow pace. We are trying, within the last decade to move faster, but we've seen an increasing appetite for this from 2017 also coming, of course. The Vice President putting himself in the middle as a digital champion, as people will say, and getting all government actors to follow suit. Right. And it's something that we need to redouble our steps to get through, because that's the way the world is going. And if you want to deal with some of the petty problems that are confronting nations, making things quite difficult and bringing a lot of inefficiencies and deadweight losses to nations, digitization and digitalization is the way to
They are the way to go.
And we are
my final bit to you, we need some clarity here. So when it comes to when exactly you're rolling out this program, where we're going to know that government officials are going to be operating with the e-travel card, when should we look at? Is it already in the offing?
Yeah, so the first card was issued to Vice President last week. Controller is in the process of making sure that these cards are rolled out as soon as possible. It's not something that we want to put on the table to a later date. And so I'm pretty much sure that from this month or next month, any government official who is mandated to travel and has approval from the ministry or department or agency, and controller approves of how much, that person will be issued a card.
So you're saying as soon as possible. So we don't know whether if a government official were to be traveling today, they would be affected. We don't know that.
I'm not so sure of today, but I can say at least within February or from 1st of March, we should be able to get it going.
So latest by the 1st of March, we should expect that any government officials' travels would, involve the e-travel card.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
And it should not just be limited to government finances and government officials. I think multimedia or any other agency can implement that. It helps saves a lot of money, and I'm sure if multimedia should adopt this is also going to help. It's not something that, and I know there are companies in Ghana that already have that system in place. When officials from that company are traveling, they issue them cards. They don't give them cash. Right. And I know even within our market circles, our market women and people who travel to China, Dubai to ply trade and commerce, some of them, before they travel, instead of going to change cedis into dollars, they go and get some of these temporary cards. I got one about 2 months ago when I wanted someone to buy something for me from Holland. I went and got the person the card. I didn't want to give the person cash Because if the person goes and comes to tell me I bought this at $5, I don't have trace of it. So I went, Fidelity Bank gave me a temporary card. I loaded money onto the card and gave to the person. Every transaction the person made, I got an alert on my phone through text messages when they came.
So basically,
exactly. So
it's the way to go.
It's the way to go, and it helps. Yeah.
Doc, thank you so much for joining the conversation, and we'll be watching to see how this works and how efficient it's going to be moving forward.
And I'm sure we will have the opportunity to come back one day to talk about how much savings we're making as a country.
I look forward to that.
Thank
I
you
look
so
forward
much.
to that.
Thank you.
Well, this is how we wrap the conversation this morning on the AM show, the e-travel car. Thank you for your company. At 10 and at noon, we'll bring you our news bulletins, but a very happy birthday to Emefa Atiamwa Eli, my colleague here at the Multimedia Group. Happy birthday to you. To all of you out there, do have a lovely day and stay as we bring you the rest of our programs.